All right, hi there, everyone. Welcome to this Friday edition of Believe in Bills. Adam Benigni, WGRZ TV Sports Talk Live. Maiorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. And from Pittsburgh, where the joint practice and preseason game is going to take, an old friend, Jay Skurski, with the Buffalo News down there covering the team. And Jay, we go back, man. This brings back memories of Sports Talk Live during the pandemic, kind of just like this.
Yeah. We're angling the camera. We're getting the lighting right. We're doing, this is, I don't know if they're necessarily good memories because they were in the pandemic, but it is nice to be with you again. Obviously, different scenario down here in Pittsburgh, but at least we're not camped out in our basements for permanently.
Yeah. Right.
But obviously you're more excited to be with me, right, Jay?
Sal, I'm always excited to be with you. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed that you're not down here with me. I'm going to miss having you sitting next to me in the press box on Saturday.
I know. Yeah, we've got our travel ban is still in effect for the summer, so I'm not down there. But Jay's one of those guys, Adam, that every time I start thinking about possibly retiring, he gets in my face and says I can't retire because he would just miss all the laughing that I provide.
Right. None of it. Well, you know what I miss? What I miss most is hearing Sal Jay talk about, well, the Yankees stand out, obviously, but his trials and tribulations of travel, like planes, trains, and automobiles, that stuff. Sal is just epic for that.
He is cursed beyond measure when it comes to travel. I always want to see Sal at the game. I never want to go with him to the game because I know it's not going to go well. So
I think it was in Baltimore or whatever.
I always tell the guys in Rochester at the airport, if you see me going to your flight, change.
There was
change
one
your reservation.
I think it was Baltimore, Sal. We were on a connection or something, and you come walking up to get on the plane. I'm like, well, this thing's delayed. There's no question about it. It hadn't been announced yet. All right. Okay, so there's an obvious overriding theme here in storyline coming out of Pittsburgh, Jay. Sal and I were on with Dr. Chow, Pro Football Doc, yesterday about the Matt Milano situation. Torn bicep, out indefinitely, maybe back in December, at best case, late November, according to Dr. Chow. You're down there. You talked to Sean McDermott yesterday and follow this team as closely as anyone. What's your take on it all? That's a big hit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge injury. It's, he's one of the guys on the short list that you can't lose. And, unfortunately, they lost him last year. He worked so hard to get back. I had a chance to talk with Matt Milano early in training camp. And if you know Matt Milano, as we all do, he's not much of a talker. And so sitting down with him and just getting a feel for what he went through to get back. I mean, listen, this guy had no offseason. He had no, it's easy. Matt Milano's from Florida. It's easy for a guy to get hurt and, escape the Buffalo winter and go down there and rehab. He did none of that. He stayed in Buffalo throughout and rehabbed every single day. It was a hard injury to get back from. And the real shame of it is it looked like there were flashes of the old Matt Milano, that sideline to sideline linebacker. It looked like he was rounding into form. He wasn't quite there yet, as you would expect after such a long layoff. But to get hurt in this, benign, sort of harmless tackling drill that he's done literally thousands of times in his life, hundreds of times in training camp alone since it started, is just a really tough break. So, you feel for the person first. And that came across when you listen to Sean McDermott, when you watched his press conference. You could see in the body language just the utter disappointment that they have for Matt Milano. And then, of course, quickly you turn to what it means for the defense. And, he's one of those guys that's, you say it about a select few. He's impossible to replace. His skill set is unlike pretty much anybody else that they have on the team. It allows them to play defense a different way. I mean, they play a nickel defense largely because of how effective Matt Milano is covering the pass. And to take that away, it's a big question mark now with 3 weeks to go before the regular season, how you replace him.
Yeah, I mean, Jay, we saw Dorian Williams last year as a rookie. Obviously, he was in above his head. He couldn't really process what was happening. He got the 2 starts after we replaced Milano in the London game, and they had to sit him down. They realized that guy's not ready. Now, I think Bills fans can all hope that with one season under his belt, and he did get, I think it was about 200 defensive snaps, so he was out there a little bit last year. He's got the offseason here where he, continue to prepare and get ready and get better. I guess Bills fans are looking at Terrell Bernard and saying, well, that guy made the quantum leap He replaced Tremaine Edmonds, and look what happened. Can Dorian Williams be the same story? I don't know that they're the same player, but I know from watching Dorian Williams last year and then obviously in training camp, the guy's a great, great athlete. He's every bit the athlete Matt Milano is, right? So it's possible he could do this.
Yeah, listen, I wrote today about Dorian Williams. The challenge for him is going to be to marry those athletic traits with the mental processing speed. That's what has to catch up for him. And Sale, you're absolutely right. He played 20% of the defensive snaps last year. It's probably more than what Terrell Bernard played the year prior. And when you make that comparison, I'm not going to sit here and say that Dorian Williams is going to be Terrell Bernard. That would be the absolute best case scenario for this Bills defense but we have to go back to where we were at this time last year, sitting here wondering what the Bills had in Terrell Bernard. He was hurt, missed all of the preseason. He shows up in week 1 against the Jets, and he is absolutely dynamic the entire year. So I don't know that Dorian Williams is going to be able to do that. But listen, they drafted this guy in the 3rd round. They believed in him. A 3rd-round pick in the NFL is not inconsequential. That means that you think the guy can play. And so now it's just show it for Dorian Williams. You've had time to learn the defense. Bobby Babich, the new defensive coordinator, was his position coach last year. He knows him as well as anyone else on that coaching staff. It can potentially know a player. So, again, can you replace Milano? No. Sean McDermott said that yesterday. But this is not a desperation 1-year veteran signing. This is not an undrafted free agent off the street. This is a guy that they drafted who they think can play more than just special teams. They think he can play defensively. And now the challenge for Dorian Williams is going to be to go out there and prove them right in that regard.
I got one quick question for Jay that I've been pondering too. Do you think that, they signed Nick Morrow? He was one of the first guys they signed in free agency. And I think he's more of a middle linebacker replacement. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's what this. But is it possible that a guy who has played in the league for whatever it's been 4 or 5 years, you think that's an option they're thinking about, Jay, is getting him if Dorian Williams just doesn't get it?
Yeah.
Is Morrow a possibility there?
I think absolutely. Yeah. And yesterday we saw him out at practice and he's not participating yet, but you could definitely tell he was ramping up the conditioning. I think he's getting close to being back. And I think that's the fallback plan. Definitely. I agree with you, Sal. I think he was brought in to be more of that veteran backup middle linebacker. But, everything that we know about the defense, Sal, and Adam as well, I think that those linebacker positions are somewhat interchangeable. So a guy like Morrow, while he might be called a middle linebacker, I think for sure he'd be able to step in there. Ideally, that doesn't happen, though. You want Dorian Williams to take this job and make it his. Mm-hmm. You want them to make this a hard decision to bring Matt Milano back. You want Dorian Williams to play so well. So I think if they were to go to Morrow, if they were to go to Deion Jones, another veteran linebacker that they signed, Balin Spector can't stay healthy. We'll talk about that. He missed practice again yesterday with a calf injury. That's a problem. So to me, option A, plan A is Dorian Williams. After that, I think maybe you get to the veterans, either Morrow or Jones.
Jay, to put this in maybe a broader context in terms of gauging the impact of this and factoring in all of the unknowns and kind of the X factors with Dorian Williams and how much he's improved and how ready he is to assume this role. And you referenced the type of defense and how the Bills like to execute. You factor a loss like this in with what's happening at the safety position and having to replace Hyde and Poyer there. I mean, there's a ripple effect throughout this defense when you pull a guy like Milano out of there, I guess is the point I'm making.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When you look at the back half of the defense, starting at linebacker and going to secondary, they've got all sorts of questions right now. I mean, they can't stay healthy at safety. Yesterday, Damar Hamlin, who's only in the lineup because Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop are out, he leaves practice early. So, you are in a bad way there at safety. They've got to get healthy there. And yeah, the Milano thing is kind of the last thing you wanted because you had some stability at linebacker with Bernard and Milano. You knew what you had, both in terms of the players, but maybe more so even the leadership. We talked to Deion Dawkins yesterday about this a little. Him and Milano are part of that 2017 class, Dawkins and Milano are part of that 2017 class. The only guy on the team who's been around longer is Reed Ferguson, right? So you're losing, in addition to the player that Matt Milano is, and I know, we joke about it in the media, the guy is not the most outgoing with us, but he's a leader in that room. And for a team that lost 6 captains from last year, to lose another leader in Milano is just another challenge for Sean McDermott and this coaching staff. in addition to figuring out who's going to be healthy enough, who can actually play for us, who's going to be the leader of this team defensively. Milano was going to be one of those guys they counted on. They're not going to have that now.
One thing, Jay, that was coming up yesterday as I was, watching everybody tweet from Pittsburgh and then, fans interacting even with me, the 3 safety look, right, that they relied on last year when they lost Milano. Dude, I can't see that happening. No. I mean, last year you had Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, and then Taylor Rapp was the third guy on the field. I can't imagine there's a scenario where Sean McDermott looks at his safety rotation and he throws out there Taylor Rapp, DeMar Hamlin, and right now, because of the injuries, Cam Lewis. I can't imagine that's a possibility. So Dorian Williams is on the spot here. He's got to come through for them.
He absolutely does. And even when they get some of these guys back, whether it be Morrow or particularly at safety, Edwards or Bishop, how quickly are they going to be able to play, to be ready to play? I think of Cole Bishop, when he was drafted, Sal, I thought he was going to be a starter for this team. I thought as soon as week 1, he could be a starter, kind of the same way that Osiris Torrance was last year, 2nd-round pick, ended up starting the entire year. Sean McDermott in training camp, very early in camp, said something I found very interesting. The 3 hardest positions in his mind to learn at the NFL level are quarterback, middle linebacker, and safety. Well, Cole Bishop and his on-field learning has been really stunted here with this injury. So even if he is healthy enough to be on the field ahead of week 1, how much can this coaching staff trust him being out there? I think that's going to be a real challenge for Cole Bishop and for the Bills to put him out there that early.
Excellent point, Jay. And major questions to answer here on defense as well as on the offensive side of the football, the receiver room, all of that. So you're down there. You saw the joint practice yesterday. What were some of your takeaways? And look, these are we've talked about this before, Jay. I mean, if you talk to coaches and personnel people around the National Football League, in terms of player evaluation and those sorts of things, I think it's fair to say most get more out of a joint practice situation than they do a preseason game itself, which is why they're so prevalent and so much a part of the future. What were some of your takeaways from what you saw from the Bills?
Yeah, I mean, part of that is that you can script it the way that you want, right? And it was interesting to hear Sean McDermott talk about, he kind of followed Mike Tomlin's lead on how the practice would go. I think, McDermott had some input, but yeah, this is something that they haven't done since 2019 with the Panthers. So it's a relatively new experience for basically this entire roster for the most part. 180 players on one football field is pretty chaotic, right? So you've got the Bills offense working against the Steelers defense on one half, vice versa on the other half. So you're kind of bouncing between trying to watch a lot of different things. I thought the Bills defense against the Steelers starting offense, Russell Wilson, really had a nice day. One player that kind of stood out to me a little bit was Daquan Hardy, the rookie nickel cornerback. He had at least 3 pass breakups. He's in an interesting sort of roster battle there. I think Sal and I have talked on the sideline a little bit about it's kind of hard to see how he gets to the 53-man roster, but he had a really good day. Offensively, I didn't watch the offense as much as I did the defense, but Dalton Kincaid I thought looked really, really good. That's good news for a group that's still trying to sort out who are going to be their pass catchers, particularly at wide receiver. But if Dalton Kincaid can be the sort of steadying presence in that pass catching game that a lot of people think he can be, that's going to be really good, particularly at the beginning of the year as they're kind of finding their way at receiver. So those were a couple of guys that stood out to me. But yeah, it's a funny scene seeing 180 players on one football field and trying to make it all work.
Jay, you mentioned Hardy, and he really is an interesting situation, right? I mean, his path to the roster is going to be, can he return both kicks and punts, right? I mean, I can't imagine they're going to bring a return-only guy and have him just do one side of it. He's got to be able to do both. But I did notice before they left town here, they were playing a little bit, and actually in the game against the Bears, they used Hardy on the outside at cornerback a little bit in that game. He had been pretty much a slot corner at Penn State, I think, for his whole career. He didn't really play outside. So it felt to me like the Bills are trying to see if this guy can be more than just a return guy, because his path to the roster wasn't going to be probably as a nickelback and a return guy. He's got to play some corner. If he can do it, and from what I understand yesterday, again, you just said it, he had a pretty good day. Somebody tweeted that he had like 3 pass breakups, they thought.
Yeah.
That to me is his path. If he can prove to be, I know Jamarcus Ingram, a lot of people think that he's going to be the fourth corner, but he doesn't give you anything in the return game. That's where Hardy maybe has a chance. But the other question too on this though is Ty Johnson. Is Ty Johnson going to be the guy that can handle returns and then they can save the roster spot and maybe get Daquan Hardy back on the practice squad? That's going to be an interesting thing to look for these next 2 weeks.
Yeah. Ty Johnson, I think, he's back at practice now. I expect that he'll play Saturday night against the Steelers. Yeah, the return, I don't think they could have left that game against the Bears feeling real good about what they had at returner. I mean, those guys struggled. They had a hard time tracking the ball. We saw KJ Hamler put one on the ground, and it led to like a 2-yard return. It's not an easy stadium to catch, kickoffs and punts in. We've seen that time and again, and it's one of those positions, both returners that I think we don't think about a lot in the offseason. You just, it's a returner. Just stick somebody back there. But when you don't have a good one, it very quickly sort of shows itself. And so I think I agree with you, Sal. I think they'd love for Hardy to be able to be that guy that can take that job. I think he's got a long way to go. KJ Hamler has probably been his primary competition for that. I didn't think he had a very good game at all against the Bears. I think he's on the outside looking in right now with the roster. So, we're getting there, right? We're 3 weeks away from the start of the regular season, and some of those races for let's call them the last 5 or 6 spots on this 53-man roster, I think are really competitive right now. They're really up in the air right now. And so with 2 preseason games left, I think that's where our attention should be against the Bears and then against the Panthers.
Adam, I'd like you to weigh in on this too, but my thought on Hamler is I don't see him making this team in any way as a receiver, right? I mean, there's guys on that depth chart that are just better at receiver than he is. Plus, he has such a similar skill set to Shakir, and even Keon Coleman is better in the short areas. I don't see how Hamler can make the team just as a return guy. I just don't see that. I see the path clearer for Hardy to make it as a cornerback and return guy. Adam, what do you think about Hamler? I don't see it. I just don't see it with him.
No, to me, the numbers just don't. I agree exactly with what you're saying. The numbers just don't add up, and the versatility weighs in and factors in. Final take from Jay here before we move on to the preseason game itself.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of the guys that I'm going to be looking at, we talked about the returners there a little bit. I'm really interested along the defensive line. I wrote about Javon Solomon earlier this week, and we talked about numbers crunches at certain positions, right? Receiver, defensive back. But the defensive line, to me, is really you've got 3 guys at edge, right? Rousseau, Miller, and Epinesa that are locks. I think Dwayne Smoot is pretty darn close to a lock as your 4th defensive end. So Javon Solomon is competing with Kingsley Jonathan, who spent a lot of time on the 53-man roster, and Casey Toohill, who's been hurt. He was a free agent signing. There are so many spots on this team where it's like, boy, you'd love to keep maybe one more, but if you do that, you're subtracting from somewhere else. And that sort of designated edge rusher, that pass rusher, the guy who's like a pass rush specialist, is not something that they've really had on this roster under Sean McDermott before. He's open to the idea, though. So can Solomon do enough as a rookie, as a 5th-round pick? You would not want to cut a 5th-round pick and expose him to waivers. That's not ideal. But I don't know if Solomon's going to be able to do enough to unseat one of those guys or to convince them to keep 5 defensive ends. A lot of positions, though. You go to wide receiver. Do they keep 5 or do they keep 6 there? Can Hamler, find his way to the roster? I agree with you, Sal. I don't know that he can. So those are just a couple of positions that I'm really interested in seeing. How do these later round draft picks, the Hardys, the Solomons of the world, the 5th and 6th round picks, how do they find their way onto the 53-man roster? Because this is a competitive team to make.
Yeah,
so we're talking. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. On the edge rusher position, I think Solomon's going to make it because, like you said, they're not going to risk putting him out there. They like what they saw. I think Casey Toohill is the guy on the outside looking in. I mean, They signed him as a free agent. They didn't invest all that much money. He really, you're down there. You saw the joint practice, but just in watching him when they were up here in Rochester, he never popped once for me. He certainly didn't pop in the game against the Bears. So I think there's a guy you're probably going to move on from. So I think Solomon is going to make it, but he's probably going to be the inactive guy every week, at least early in the year, right? I mean, I can't imagine they're going to – and Smoot, your point on Smoot, he's making the team because he's proven he can go inside, right? They need one of those edge rushers, the way, they've had that guy in the past. Jordan Phillips kind of did that a little bit. He could play inside and out. So I think he's going to make the team Smoot, and I think Solomon will make it because there's no way they're going to give up on him so quickly. Adam, go ahead.
Right, just going to say really good insight, guys, in terms of what's happening at the bottom of the roster and the depth chart and the position battles, which so much of this is about in the preseason. But I want to talk, as we put a wrap on this in the next couple of minutes here, about what's happening at the top half of the roster and maybe a little bit of the big picture and concerns that a lot of Bills fans have coming out of that first preseason game and that loss to the Bears. We all know here, you don't read too much into it. And at the time we're recording this, we're not sure what the plan is for Buffalo in terms of how much time the starters will see in this game. I do get the sense that given what happened against Chicago, Sean McDermott's probably going to want to see, some reps from them in there. We don't know Josh Allen's status, but I guess the point is, Jay, and Sal and I have talked about this at length, and I think what bothered both of us the most coming out of that game, yes, we've seen the penalties and we've seen them recover from that before, but the physicality, the fact they lost the battle in the line of scrimmage, the loss of Mitch Morse on the offensive line, and kind of the shuffle that's gone on there seems to be making a profound impact. I mean, I do think you can read into it to some extent what they're going through, particularly in that spot, and how it translates in game. I mean, to lose the physical battle like they did, I do think that's legitimate concern at this point coming out of the loss to Chicago and heading into Saturday night. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I talked to Connor McGovern, the new center, after the game, and he expressed no concern whatsoever. He said we had about 3 or 4 run plays in. They didn't game plan at all for the Bears, what you expect to hear kind of after an ugly defeat in the preseason. However, you didn't open any holes on those 3 or 4 run plays that you did run, right? And so whether it was James Cook or Ray Davis, there was nowhere for this team to run. I mean, you guys know, you're in those press conferences with Sean McDermott after every single game. What is the first thing that he talks about? If it's not turnovers, it's winning the battle along the line of scrimmage. Those are what Sean McDermott believes in. His core philosophy as a head coach is you've got to win the battle on both lines of scrimmage and not turn the ball over, right? Not unlike a lot of other coaches, but that is constant, that message from Sean McDermott. So he could not have been pleased with the way that game played out. Whether or not they game planned for it or not, they lost the toughness battle, and that's something that he doesn't like to do. How much of that? I don't know how much of that has to do with Morse. It is an adjustment, though, that they're going to have to make, but I do expect that they are going to come out against the Steelers. And listen, the Steelers, I know it's the preseason. I get it all. What's their reputation? That's a hard-nosed football team. That's everything that you always think about with the Steelers is they play hard, right, under Mike Tomlin, and that goes back even before Mike Tomlin. So, if you could pick a good, quote unquote, second opponent in the preseason, I think the Steelers are that, because I think they're going to challenge them physically.
I was just going to make that point, Jay. That this is the perfect team for the Bills to be playing, because they need to come out and show something in the physicality department. That was, to me, it was an embarrassment. I heard McGovern say all that to them, blah, blah, blah. We only had a few plays in. Too bad. Those plays are in, make them work.
Yeah,
and they didn't make anything work. So I don't want to hear about they didn't game plan and all they had simple runs in. Man on man. It's a man versus man, whip his ass type of game. And that did not happen. So I think the Steelers, you're right. They are the perfect team to be in front of the Bills, because they're going to come out and they're going to want to kick some ass, and the Bills have got to respond.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much as always. Terrific insight and takes heading into the second preseason game. And Jay, thank you. Jay Skurski, Buffalo News, always strong takes. Tough but fair in terms of the questions you ask, critical, which is something that that approach, Sal and I think it's fair to say, hold near and dear to our hearts, and one we've taken over the years. So we appreciate the fact and your leadership among the Bills media. You do a great job for representing everyone. So thank you.
Since I'm sort of retired from golf, as Jay knows, and Jay is also trying to get me to unretire, I want a full report on the topic. This is replacing the Bills media tournament, the way I understand it today.
It is an amends of sorts for not having the media tournament. So the Bills have got us set up with a couple hours at Top Golf down here in Pittsburgh, and it'll be a lot of fun. It won't be the same without you boys, both of you. I'm going to convince Sal by the media tournament next year to get the sticks out. Hey, listen, it's not just me doing the convincing. I heard Brandon Bean doing a little campaigning as well. So we're all eager for you. Sales dropped some pounds. I see him. He's out there. He's doing his laps at training camp around. He's ready to go. Next thing we got to do is just get him to pick up that driver again. It's close. I feel it coming this year.
Bean told me at camp the other day, before they left Rochester, we were talking, and he said, I told him, I said, it'll just piss me off if I can't break 80. It's going to be hard for me to recover because I know I'm not going to be able to do it anymore if I start up again. And he goes, Sal, you have to understand you're old. you weren't going to probably be breaking 80 anyways as you got older. You're 61 years old. So you got to change your expectations. So we'll see. We'll see, guys. I've been pondering the driving range for a few weeks. We'll see. We'll see.
All right.
All right.
All right, Jay, we appreciate your time. This is all, Jay Skurski, Buffalo News, anything you want to, this is free plug time, right?
Yeah.
So anything you want to plug in terms of the coverage and what fans can look for here.
Yeah, just find me at buffalonews.com. I'm on social media, at Jay Skurski. You can follow along there. We'll be down there at the game tomorrow. Hopefully we're recording this the day before the game. Hopefully we'll get some word. Stay tuned on that in terms of playing time for the starters. I know people will be interested in that. And, just follow along all season there and at buffalonews.com.
All right, Jay. Thank you very much, Sal. As always, Bills and Steelers Saturday night down in Pittsburgh, preseason game number 2. Thanks very much for being with us here on Believe on Bills.